Hey everyone, and welcome back to AI Paper Podcasts.
All right.
Today we are diving deep into Fractal Generative Models.
Oh, yeah.
By Tianhong, Likini, Sunlijifan,
Cool.
and Kaming.
Nice.
Now, this paper is making waves because it introduces a completely new way of thinking about generative AI, taking inspiration from, yeah, you guessed it, fractals.
Those are cool.
So instead of building one massive model to generate complex outputs like images, they're using smaller generative models as building block in a recursive fractal-like structure.
Yeah, it's a really clever approach.
Exactly.
Instead of, tilting one massive model to generate complex outputs like images,
Right.
They're using smaller generative models as building blocks in a recursive fractal-like structure.
So for those tuning in for the short form version, here's the key takeaway.
Okay.
This paper introduces a revolutionary approach called Fractal Generative Models for creating AI that can generate complex outputs like images. These models use smaller generative models as building blocks in a recursive fractal-like way, resulting in a highly efficient and scalable architecture.
Right.
This approach has the potential to revolutionize image generation and many other fields dealing with high-dimensional data.
Think of it like building with Lego bricks.
Okay.
Each brick is a self-contained unit, but you can combine them to create incredibly complex structure.
Yeah.
That's essentially what they're doing here, but with AI models.
And the beauty of this approach is that it's incredibly efficient.
Totally.
The authors show that they can generate high-resolution images with significantly less computational power than traditional methods.
Yeah.
We'll get into the specifics later, but this has huge implications for scaling up generative AI.
Absolutely. It tackles a fundamental challenge in computer science, modularization.
Okay, let's unpack that.
Yeah.
For our listeners who might not be familiar with the term, why is modularization so important in computer science, and especially in AI?
Imagine trying to build a complex software program without breaking it down into smaller, manageable modules.
Right.
It would be a nightmare.
Yeah.
Modularization allows us to create reusable components that can be assembled and reconfigured in different ways, making the whole system more flexible and easier to understand.
So it's like breaking down a complex problem into smaller, bite-sized pieces.
Exactly. And in the context of AI, we already see this with deep neural networks. Each layer of the network is essentially a module that performs a specific function. And by stacking these layers together, we create these incredibly powerful AI systems.
Right.
This paper takes that concept a step further, applying modularization to the generative models themselves.
So instead of building one monolithic generative model, they're creating these fractal-like structures made up of smaller interconnected modules.
Yeah.
Fascinating. But before we delve deeper into the technical details, let's back up a bit and talk about fractals themselves.
Okay.
What exactly are they and what makes them so relevant to this research?
Good point. I think a lot of people have a general idea of what a fractal is. Those beautiful self-repeating patterns you see in snowflakes, coastlines, trees.
Right, like nature's own recursive art projects.
Exactly. But from a mathematical perspective, fractals are fascinating because they exhibit self-similarity across different scales.
Okay.
Zoom in on a fractal and you'll see the same patterns repeating at smaller and smaller levels.
And the authors of this paper saw a connection between these natural fractals and how biological neural networks are structured, right?
Precisely. There's growing evidence that the brain itself exhibits fractal-like properties, suggesting that our own neural networks might be organized in this modular recursive way. This was a key inspiration for the paper's approach.
So they're essentially trying to make AI think more like our brains using fractals as the blueprint. That's a pretty bold idea.
It is, and they specifically focused on image generation as a test case because it presents a unique set of challenges.
Right, because generating images pixel by pixel is incredibly computationally demanding, even for powerful AI models.
Exactly, think about it. A single high-resolution image can contain millions of pixels, each with its own color and intensity value. Traditional generative models struggle to capture all those intricate relationships at once. It's a classic problem of dimensionality.
So it's not just about creating pretty pictures, it's about tackling a fundamental problem in AI, how to model complex high-dimensional data efficiently. And this is where the fractal approach really shines.
Absolutely. Instead of trying to model all those pixels at once, fractal generative models break the problem down into smaller, self-similar sub-problems. It's like a divide and conquer strategy, but applied to image generation.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this connects back to the idea of fractals.
Yeah.
You're essentially creating a hierarchy of generative models where each level focuses on a specific scale of detail.
Exactly. You start by modeling relationships between large patches of the image, then you zoom into smaller patches and finally to individual pixels. And the key is that you're using the same type of generative model at each level, in this case, autoregressive models.
Ah, autoregressive models. Now, those are a popular choice for sequence generation, like predicting the next word in a sentence. How do they fit into this fractal picture?
Well, you can think of an image as a sequence of pixels, even though it's a two-dimensional structure. An autoregressive model learns to predict the value of each pixel based on the pixels that came before it, just like predicting the next word in a sentence.
So it's like filling in the blanks, but for images, I get it. But how does using autoregressive models within this fractal framework make the process more efficient?
That's the ingenious part. By leveraging the self-similarity of fractals, you can generate an exponential number of outputs, in this case image pixels, with only a linear increase in the number of fractal levels. It's like getting more bang for your computational buck.
So you're essentially exploiting the inherent structure of fractals to drastically reduce the computational cost of generating complex images. That's impressive. But does this actually work in practice? I mean, are they getting good results with these fractal generative models? They're getting some really impressive results.
That's awesome.
The authors tested their fractal generative models on ImageNet, which is a massive data set of images. And they got some seriously impressive results. Not only were they able to generate high-quality images, but they also achieved excellent likelihood estimation scores.
And that likelihood estimation score is important, right? It tells us how well the model captures the underlying structure of the data.
Exactly. It means the model isn't just spitting out random pixels.
No.
It's actually learning the patterns and relationships that make up a realistic image.
That's right. And one of the most compelling aspects is the potential for scalability. They demonstrated that modeling a 256 by 256 image is only twice as computationally expensive as a 64 by 64 one, thanks to the fractal design.
Wow, that's a game changer. Imagine being able to generate ultra-high-resolution images without needing a supercomputer.
It opens up so many possibilities. And remember, this isn't just limited to images.
Right.
This fractal approach could be applied to generating all sorts of complex data 3D models, music, maybe even simulations of weather patterns or financial markets.
That's wild. We're talking about a whole new paradigm for generative AI, but I have to ask, what about controllability?
Okay.
With traditional generative models, you often get what you get.
Right.
Is there any way to steer the generation process with this fractal approach?
That's a great question, and it's something researchers are actively exploring. Because this method generates data piece by piece, it could potentially allow for more fine-grained control. Imagine being able to guide the AI as it's generating an image, almost like painting, with an AI brush that understands the underlying structure of what you're creating.
Whoa, that would be incredible. It would be like having an AI partner that collaborates with you in the creative process.
Exactly, and it wouldn't be limited to visual arts. Imagine composing music where the AI suggests harmonies and melodies that fit within the style you're working with, or designing a building and having the AI help you optimize for structural integrity and energy efficiency.
It sounds like fractal generative models could blur the lines between human creativity and AI assistance in some really exciting ways.
Absolutely. This paper has really pushed the boundaries of what's possible with generative AI.
Well, folks, that's our deep dive into the fascinating world of fractal generative models. We've covered a lot of ground today, but we've only just scratched the surface of this exciting new field. If you want to go deeper, be sure to check out the paper itself, which we've linked in the description below. You'll also find a link to the author's GitHub repo, where they've shared some incredible example videos of the generation process. So you delve into the world of fractal generative models, here's a thought to ponder. Could these models be the key to unlocking a future where AI not only generates data, but collaborates with us in the creative process itself? Until next time, keep exploring the frontiers of AI.